There comes a moment in every person's life when, without warning, something inside them breaks. It's not sadness, it's not anger, it's something deeper. It's as if the soul grows tired of carrying the weight of others' expectations, of maintaining relationships that only drain its energy, of trying to fit into spaces that no longer belong to it. It is in this moment that what Carl Jung described as the beginning of the true process of individuation takes place. The breaking point where the mask falls and the authentic self begins to emerge. What's curious is that this moment does not arrive with grand announcements. There's no sign in the sky, no mark on the calendar saying, "Today is the day you will set yourself free." No, it comes when you least expect it, but when you need it the most. It rises after many nights spent trying to convince yourself that things would get better, that maybe if you changed, if you tried harder, if you ignored that feeling in your chest screaming that something wasn't right, then everything would fall into place. But it doesn't. It never does. And then, in the midst of emotional exhaustion, the decision to say enough happens. For Jung, this moment is a call from the unconscious. It is not a whim nor a simple emotional reaction. It is a deep message from the psyche, a silent scream that has been waiting for years to be heard. It is the beginning of a journey with no return, because once you decide to let go of what no longer belongs to you, once you dare to walk toward your authenticity, there is no going back. The person you once were begins to disappear, and in their place, someone new emerges. Someone stronger, more conscious, more you. What many people fail to understand is that saying enough is not an act of rebellion, but an act of self-love. It's not the end, it's the beginning. But why is it so hard? Why, even knowing something harms us, do we struggle so much to let go? Jung explained this in such a clear way that it hurts to accept it. Because we build our identity around the very things that cause us pain. Perhaps you haven't realized it yet, but for years you've been telling yourself the same story. You justified the pain with phrases like, "That's just how things are. There's nothing I can do to change it. Maybe I deserve this. Or what if I end up alone?" Your unconscious accepted these ideas as truth, and that shaped your reality. You stayed in relationships that didn't nourish you, in jobs that dimmed your spirit, in dynamics that only wore you down. And the worst part is that a part of you came to believe this was normal, that this was life. But it's not. Jung taught us that the soul is always seeking its own evolution, and that evolution requires detaching from what no longer resonates with your authentic self. However, for that to happen, you must go through a painful yet transformative process, the encounter with the shadow. The shadow is everything you have repressed, the parts of you that you were taught to hide, the desires, thoughts, and emotions you deemed unacceptable. But the shadow does not disappear just because you ignore it. On the contrary, it manifests in your life in subtle but constant ways, in the patterns you repeat, in the relationships that hurt you, in the anxiety you can't explain. And here lies the crucial point. When you say enough, you are facing your shadow head on. You are challenging the belief system that kept you trapped. In a way, you are dying so that you can be reborn. That's why it hurts. That's why it's so difficult. Because you're not just letting go of a person, a job, or a situation. You are letting go of a version of yourself, a version that accompanied you for years, that served as your refuge, your excuse, your comfort zone, but that no longer serves you. That is no longer who you are. When you decide to let go, the unconscious reacts. At first, you will feel fear. You will have doubts. You'll wonder whether you made the right decision. And this is the point where many people turn back. But here is something essential you need to remember. Fear is not a sign that you've made a mistake. It's a sign that you're changing. The unconscious does not want you to change. Its function is to keep you in the known, the predictable. But the soul has a different plan, and this is where the real inner battle begins. The battle between the comfort of the old and the uncertainty of the new. But if you can stay strong, if you can move through the initial chaos, without turning back, something incredible happens. You begin to recover your energy. Jung spoke of this as a kind of psychic rebirth. For years, your energy was scattered, trapped in dynamics that didn't allow you to grow. Every time you tolerated a situation you didn't want, you gave up a part of your vitality. Every time you repressed an emotion out of fear of rejection, you moved a little further away from your essence. But when you make the decision to let go, all that energy returns to you. It's an almost magical process. What once seemed impossible suddenly becomes clear. What once mattered so much suddenly doesn't anymore. And what you once thought you needed suddenly no longer makes sense. But there's more, something no one tells you, something you can only discover by going through this process. The self-love that arises after saying enough is unlike any other form of love. It is a love that does not depend on external validation, that does not need approval. It is a love that is born from within, from the certainty that you are enough exactly as you are. And when you discover this, when you experience this level of love for yourself, your life changes forever. You stop searching outside for what was always inside. You stop settling for crumbs because you understand your true worth. You stop waiting for someone to save you because you realize you always had the power to save yourself. And then, in that moment, everything begins to align. Not because the universe is rewarding you for having made the right decision, but because you are finally in tune with what was always yours by right. Relationships change, paths open, opportunities appear, not because you are doing something different, but because you are finally being yourself. But the process doesn't end here, because once you discover this self-love, there is something more you need to do, something that will determine the rest of your life. When you begin to experience the self-love that emerges after saying enough, something shifts in your perception of the world. Before, you used to justify toxic behaviors, minimize red flags, and tolerate what you deep down knew wasn't right. But now, with this new self-awareness, you can no longer ignore what once went unnoticed. It's as if you've awakened from a long sleep and, for the first time, you're seeing reality without filters. What once seemed normal now becomes unbearable. The excuses you used to give yourself no longer make sense. And this is where one of the deepest transformations takes place. You begin to see people as they truly are, not as you wish they were. For years, you convinced yourself that if you tried hard enough, you could change someone, make them see your worth. You believed that by being so good, so understanding, so loyal, sooner or later, you would receive the love and respect you deserved. But now you understand that this was never your responsibility. That no matter how much you love someone, you cannot fill the emptiness of a person who is unwilling to fill it for themselves. Jung explained that when a person has not integrated their shadow, they project their internal conflicts onto others. That's why the same dynamics often repeat endlessly in many relationships. A person who has not faced their own darkness will unconsciously seek someone to serve as a mirror for their chaos. And if, in the past, you were that person, if you allowed someone to unload their wounds onto you without taking responsibility, it was because you had not yet realized something fundamental. You were not there to heal them, but to learn how to heal yourself. But when you say enough, when you refuse to continue in that dynamic, something unexpected happens. The people who once controlled you through guilt, manipulation, or empty promises begin to reveal their true face. Maybe they react with anger. Maybe they try to make you feel guilty. Maybe they tell you that you've changed. And the truth is, they're right. You have changed. You are no longer the person who accepted the unacceptable. You are no longer the one who silenced your voice out of fear of losing something. Self-love is not a fleeting feeling. It is an inner construction that, when solidified, becomes the foundation upon which you build your entire life. But for that love to grow, you must face the hardest trial of all, solitude. Because when you let go of what no longer serves you, an emptiness remains, a space that was once occupied by relationships, habits and beliefs that, though painful, were familiar. And in that void, in that uncertainty, fear arises. The fear of having made a mistake, the fear of being alone, the fear of not finding anything better. But here you must remember what Jung taught. The unconscious does not seek comfort, it seeks transformation. And every transformation involves a period of chaos before clarity comes. During this process, it's normal for nostalgia to make you doubt, for you to miss what you left behind. Not because you want it back, but because your mind hasn't yet gotten used to freedom. But that feeling of loss is only temporary, because deep down there's something you now know with certainty. You could never go back to being the person you were before awakening. And it is exactly at that moment that you begin to attract something entirely different. Not because you are desperate to fill the emptiness, but because you are now vibrating at a different frequency. Jung said that what we experience in the outer world is nothing more than a reflection of our inner world. When you were broken inside, when you didn't value yourself, you attracted people and situations that reinforced that belief. But now that you recognize your worth, now that you understand that self-love is non-negotiable, everything changes. The people you used to relate to no longer fit in your life, not because you push them away, but because they no longer resonate with you. Situations you used to tolerate now become intolerable. And instead of wondering if you're being too demanding, you realize that you're simply setting a new standard. You no longer accept less than you deserve, not because you think you're better, but because you finally become someone who respects herself. This is where many people fail, where they go back because the process of transformation is not linear. There are moments when you feel like you're making progress, and others when it seems you're going backwards. But the key is not to let uncertainty take the lead. Jung said that the greatest danger on the path of individuation is the fear of the void, and the void can be terrifying. But what no one taught us is that the void is the sacred space where the new can be born. If you fill that space too quickly, if you go back to what's familiar out of fear of the unknown, you will never discover what was truly meant for you. That's why after saying enough, after letting go of what no longer serves you, the most important step is to allow yourself to be in that void, to feel it, to explore who you are without all those emotional burdens, because something incredible happens. When you resist the urge to fill that space with just anything, clarity arrives. That clarity that once seemed unreachable. That deep understanding that you don't need anything external to feel complete. And when you reach that point, when you truly understand what it means to love yourself, your life begins to respond in ways you never imagined. Because now, you no longer act out of lack, but from abundance. You don't seek love, you radiate love. You don't beg for attention, you attract it. You don't settle for the minimum because you know your worth. And this energy, this new version of you, begins to reflect in everything around you. The people who come into your life no longer arrive to take something from you, but to share something with you. The opportunities that once seemed impossible are now within reach. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. Now that you understand this truth, I want you to do something. Don't keep this message to yourself. Share this knowledge with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who is still trapped in the same cycle you've broken free from. Because what you just heard is not just a reflection, it is a tool for transformation. Leave your comment below and tell me what resonated the most with you in this message. I want to know where you are in this process and what you've learned from your own journey. And if this content touched your soul, help me spread this message to more people. Share this video, subscribe if you haven't yet, and hit the notification bell so we can continue growing together on this journey of self-discovery and transformation. Remember, change begins with you.